Alright, welcome back to WeatherGod's Wisdom, where we're going to be discussing, briefly, Hurricane Lorenzo and the ongoing flash flooding situation in southern Wisconsin and far eastern New Mexico, along with this entire area of flash flood watches and flash flood warnings in here. So, first we're going to talk about Lorenzo here. Lorenzo is now entering an extratropical transition phase and is passing dangerously close to the Azores here. You're actually seeing hurricane force winds. If you look at map now going over some of these islands in here, and you can see that the tropical storm force wind field has extended all the way out to the easternmost islands, and so hurricane conditions are affecting essentially 80% of the islands at this point. And so hopefully that these islands were prepared for such a strike, as it is still a Category 2 hurricane, and the core is very spread out, so that means that these winds will be experienced over a very large area. And the forecast for the system is for it essentially to kind of go extratropical, and it's already done that essentially, and it will turn into the British Isles here. And I don't know if anyone's watching me from the British Isles, but this is going to be very powerful and will probably do a lot of damage in here because you're not used to experiencing a system like this you can have powerful winter storms that come in here, but nothing quite like Lorenzo of such powerful proportions and such large tropical storm force wind field. So you really I would appreciate it if people prepared for this accordingly, because this will be like getting hit by a very strong tropical storm over a very large swath. And keep in mind that the forecast cone does not denote the impacts, but because you can see how large this tropical storm force wind field is, and this is probably the size of the majority of the British Isles in here. So, and this will be getting bigger as time goes along. And, the National Hurricane Center may not, say, well, that, tropical storm force winds will be experienced in here as much because of it interacting with land. But this will likely, you got 50 to 60% all across Ireland. And as the storm gets closer, the percentages will likely go up for the UK. And so do please be ready for something that is pretty serious in here. Anyway, now we're going to get into the flash flood threat that is now over the majority of the central United States. You're already starting to see that happen in southern Wisconsin and central Michigan in here. This is largely due to a very forceful kind of stream in here of very rich tropical moisture associated with the remnants of Tropical Depression Narda, which is kind of being enhanced by this trough that has now kind of dived over the southwestern United States and is forcing all this moisture northward in congruence with a ridge that is also kind of forcing this moisture northward. You've got a very stark divide in here and a very high pressure gradient in here. So this moisture is moving very fast. And so what's happening is, if you look at, and credit goes to College of Dupage meteorology for all this, you can see this kind of stream of rain that is moving very slowly off to the south, largely training mainly to the northeast here. But you've got these lines of storms. They're not all severe. This is close to severe, but this is not. Lots of this is not severe. It's just mainly heavy rain, and you'll get some, embedded bow echoes in here like this one, and this one. But overall, this is not really that powerful, so to speak. But the problem is that the rain is very heavy, and that it is going over these areas for hours and hours, and you can see that there's not really an end in sight. Maybe central Wisconsin, you're starting to see the end of this rain. Central Michigan, and now this line is headed towards Detroit and will likely continue throughout the night. They're going to be beginning to experience this, and you can see that the line is beginning to connect, and you're beginning to see this kind of long train of storms developing in here. And so that is why under Flash Flood Watch, go to the National Weather Service, you can see all these flash flood warnings that are over here, and flood warnings actually now in north central Michigan, but this large area is under flash flood conditions. And you notice actually down here too that you've got flood advisories in here, and if you check out the radar for the south, you can see why these storms are also training due to the moisture from NARDA. And so you're seeing these training cells over relatively low population areas in here in northwest Texas, south of Amarillo. Amarillo is right in here, and you got Lubbock to the north. You can actually see alpha boundary is going to make it a nice evening over here, but you can see that this stretches on for miles and is not really moving that much out of this area, so we could actually see a flash flood warning for these storms. But you can see this is kind of all enhanced by tropical moisture, and you can see even further to the south, you're starting to see that a little bit. And as this kind of goes over these areas, and continues to flood, you're talking about Interstate 20 in here, maybe Amarillo starting to get impacted, but most of this should stay south of Amarillo for the time being. But in the meantime, while this is kind of making its way up to Amarillo, they do need to be watching out for any potential flooding that is going to occur with this. And so that's kind of the rundown for this evening. I'm going to go back to the water vapor loop for the United States, and you can see this kind of dominant pattern in here is over the southeastern United States. This is beginning to degrade a little bit, and this high is starting to kind of feel the push from this very powerful trough, and this trough will ultimately kind of exit over the high, which will push it further south. And some forecast models in the 16-day period are kind of hinting at a tropical system developing somewhere down here in the south, in the northwestern Caribbean, and kind of drifting into the Gulf of Mexico. Track is typically not that good in verification, and what that means is pretty much just don't trust each specific track that takes it into Texas or Florida or Alabama or Mississippi or Louisiana, or even out to sea, because it is so far out and these features have not yet formed and the fate of this high has not yet been determined. But you're starting to see kind of a degradation of sorts that is happening in here, and you're actually starting to see some mid-level moisture being pumped down from this high. But it's very clear that this is the dominant pattern, and unfortunately for the eastern two-thirds of the country, it's going to be very warm for the next several days, because this high is going to take a while for it to really kind of erode. And so stay hydrated, and as always, refer to your National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center for anything regarding all the systems that are affecting your area. And one last note is that this high is also pushing king tides into Florida on the eastern coast, and where I scrolled through Twitter today and I noticed that this is pretty bad, and this flooding is kind of a result of this very powerful winds that are pushing these tides into the eastern coast. And this would not have happened 20 years ago, but we thanks to climate change, this is kind of being enhanced in here. And there's not any thunderstorms in this area, so you're not really seeing it being forced by any storms. It's largely this high pressure that's bringing in very powerful lower level winds. You can kind of see that here, these storms are starting to move due southwest, and you're starting to see king tides come in, and it's not really that good for the eastern coast, because this is pretty bad for people that have oceanfront property, and obviously it's not a good thing to be experiencing. This is sunny day flooding. So yeah, and anyway, that's all for tonight. Thanks for watching, and as always, credit goes to tropicaltidbits.com for our satellite, NASA for providing the images, and College of Dupage, University of Wisconsin for the vorticity imagery, which we didn't look at today because the disturbance south in the northwestern Caribbean has a pretty low chance, and so I didn't really, give it enough time, and I didn't really think it was kind of worth my time. But anyway, that's all for now. See you in the next video.